This is Making Light. Julie Hurt and Kate Fogger are soul-level intuitives and animal communicators. This show is about us sharing our experiences in the hope it will help others along their path. So let's go make some light. Hi everybody, I'm Kate Fogger, this is Julie Hurt, and together we are making light to humans being. So what we've been doing is taking a theme and looking at it through the lens of different negative beliefs, because in the coaching that Julie and I do, this is our soul level intuitive coaching, we recognize 4 main negative beliefs, which I think everything I've come across falls into them or some hybrid of them. So they're basically not lovable, not good enough, not worthy, not safe, supported and protected. And soul level coaching is all about identifying your workarounds. So these are your behaviors you use in order to stop feeling bad due to your negative belief. An example would be if you were scared as a child because you were reprimanded or God forbid abused by your parents, you might have the workaround of hiding, which means as an adult this then becomes an issue because you got in this habit of hiding and you don't know how not to. So you hide in order to feel safe. So that would be your workaround. So that's really what we're doing. And we've been looking at these workarounds and then looking at them through the lens of a particular negative belief so that you can see how it works. Also just because it's fun and we like doing it. But last week we talked about denial. So this was I was going to say consumer request. It's not really a client, a watcher, a follower, a what? Customer request.
Client request.
That's the one. Client request that we look at denial, which I have to say stumped me a bit, but I'm quite warming to it. And it ended up being a coaching session on me because I've only just watched it. Still get angry looking at it. Bringing it all that angst. So we did a sort of Julie did a session on me with her guides looking at my stuff. So we covered a bit of denial there, but it wasn't there was not good enough and not worthy, but it was really a mishmash. So I didn't designate it as one or t'other. So today we have a fascinating subject, which we think we can fold round to denial one way or the other. My mother is what's the word? End of life. Just as a roller coaster at the moment. Yesterday I thought she was dying, and today she's not fine. Obviously she's not fine, but she's was sitting up in bed and having breakfast. So what can you do? And I've been warned about this, both my husband and my friend, that it will just it's exhausting. However, we would talk with Julie's mum is also suffering from dementia at a different stage, still at home with the family, or with your father rather. What sort of Julie said is, isn't it fascinating to see what dementia is teaching us? And I have a lot to say that. So we were going to give that a go and see where it takes us. Should we just do that then, Julie?
Yeah. And as you were talking, there's a couple things that came to mind as well. Thank you, guides. So if we think of denial as a means to shield ourselves from something. So whether it be the truth, whether about somebody like it's like somebody could say, Cindy is a hard person to deal with. And I would deny that. No, she's not, because I don't necessarily want to see the truth. I'm sure Cindy's a lovely person. I'm just saying, but there could be some kind of denial, which would be a veil in order to shield myself. Or if it's something about myself, like, hey, Julie, every time you do something, you make me feel badly. No, I don't, like that kind of a thing. So if I think about it in terms of denial being a veil, where we were talking about both our moms this morning was their veils have dropped. Like, you've witnessed this as your mom's gone through her process. I'm watching it happen with my mom. There's certain filters, aka veils, that are dropping as my mom she's very present, right? So she doesn't remember, like the other night we were having dinner and she would select what she wanted and then she couldn't remember. And this particular restaurant, the menus were on iPads, which for senior citizens, I beg of you, younger people,
Print it out.
Please provide a printed copy, because it's sometimes it's challenging. I get it. It makes sense. Yay. You could probably update it on the fly because it's all fed. Just something, because it's just hard. So just be mindful of the elders and what they're capable of and meet them where they are. That's all I say. That's a side note. Huh? Sorry, what?
It's not just about old people, it's the people that have to sit with them.
Well, yes, that too. That too. So my mom picked what she wanted and showed me. Luckily, she showed me. And then she kept looking at them. She couldn't remember what it was that because of course, then the screen changes, right? So then she couldn't remember. And I had to keep pressing on the thing, which was fine. And I would have had to do that if it was printed anyway. Just just know that sometimes technology just adds one more thing that they have to try to navigate. And from a person with Alzheimer's, frustration can be a thing. Like there are times when my mom gets frustrated and you can just see that anger just come up and that gets unleashed on me. So please just be mindful. Anyway, I digress. So, but she's very much in the present and in the moment. So she doesn't think about what all she can and cannot say based on what could someone else's reaction be. So like she will say like, I don't remember. Or she looked at me. She had like, I told you earlier, Kate, she had a moment of lucidity and she looked at me. She's like, even if I don't remember, please remember that I love you. Even when I get to the point where I don't remember, please. And I'm just like, I just wanted to bawl and cry. And all I did was hug her. Because oh my, just so I wouldn't cry in front of her. Because my veil, right? My denial was I didn't want her to feel bad, right? And she's just putting it out there in a way that I've never seen. So like I grew up in a family that we didn't really talk about what was going on. We didn't really talk about our families, Midwestern, German, Catholic, all the things. Nope, we don't go there. And my mom's right in the middle of it. If she sees something, she calls it out, right? So what did you want to say something? Sorry, I'm like,
No.
so the other thing that happened was that our waiter was a younger man who was really well built. And he had this t-shirt on that actually would not be my mom's thing. Like, because my mom owned women's clothing store for career women and mother of the brides, right? So she had yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I have to stop you there because when you say
Yeah,
that would not have been my mum's thing, well, you don't know that because it obviously is now.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So back in the day, this is never anything she would have, right? She wouldn't have called it out in front of her daughter, and she probably wouldn't have said it in front of her husband. Hey, this guy, I really like that that t-shirt wasn't her style, but she also wouldn't have done the next thing, which was she said to him, I really like your t-shirt. And he said, thank you. She's like, but I'm curious what it would look like without the t-shirt on. So she was commenting on his physique. And oh my gosh, like my husband, my dad, and me, we just went, no, mom, no. Don't say that, because we were denying her being in the moment. We were, oh my God, mom, you can't say that. You can't. And if that had been my dad saying it to a woman, oh my gosh, no way. But my mom was absolutely saying exactly what she thought. Yes, he's a great looking guy. Let's just call it out.
Actually, you told me this before, and I just wanted to say for those on the podcast, Julie's miming climbing under the table practically. But when you said that, you see, I suddenly heard it differently when you said it this time, and not necessarily in a creepy way. If he was obviously very muscular, there could have been a genuine curiosity. I mean, it doesn't matter. What's interesting through this whole thing is it's all about what should be said and shouldn't be said. These unwritten rules that we all abide and don't even know exist until someone crosses them, and then we're all like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
dare you? When
Yeah.
so what? But it's
Yeah.
interesting. Say that even about his t-shirt, and you think if your mum was in fashion, maybe she didn't allow herself to because you said it was a sort of gothicy, slightly punky type
Yeah.
shirt.
Yeah.
Maybe she wasn't allowed to like things like that, so she grows up thinking those things are not pretty, not attractive, not for her, and now she doesn't give a fuck, and she looks and she goes, oh, quite like that, quite like the design of that, and oh, muscles. do you think she
Yeah.
do you think she was being, shall we say, I don't want to say sexy because she's your mum, but was she being sexy or just curious?
All of the above.
Okay. Well, I have heard that. Carrie's mum used to try and talk to me about her sex life. I was like, I hardly know you, Valerie. Please don't. Just don't.
Mhm.
It's funny that, as you say, no filters.
Yeah. And one of the questions as they go through their assessment for dementia, Alzheimer's, whichever, however they need to categorize it, one of the questions was inappropriate sexual comments, which has been a thing. And I just find it interesting. And we were talking earlier, this so in the United States, we were colonized originally by Puritans. And so this Puritan mindset around sex and around the human body persists in this country, which is where we see a lot of some of the culture wars in this area. And it might other places.
Were the Puritans, were they British then?
No, they were were they British? Someone has to say, but I believe a lot of them were Dutch and or British. Maybe both. No, must have been British because we all spoke English. I don't know what the heck.
We're all terribly repressed. I mean, I wouldn't call it Puritans, but we are terribly repressed.
Well, and
Compared to the Europeans, sex
yeah,
and nudity and all of that, we're awfully repressed.
yeah, I'll have to Google yeah, maybe they're British. I just know that the Puritans were even repressed by wherever they came from for practicing their more strict religion. And I could be wrong on this, so if I am, people in the comments call me out. Because I'm right now studying a different history. Anyway, however, when you look, there's a movie that Michael Moore did years and years ago called Bowling for Columbine, and it was about when shootings in the United States, school shootings happened. And he brings it all the way back to the puritanical culture that predominates this country's culture to some degree. So anyway, but because we don't want to talk about any of that, what I find really interesting is that this is one of the call outs that someone has dementia or could have dementia or Alzheimer's because they don't care. Like they're just going to talk about, they're not going to deny that they have.
Yeah. And it's not to be offensive. And this is what the denial, I think, element is like we shudder, shock, embarrassed because we read offense in that. Whereas your mom is actually just making a statement. It is the construct of the person who listens to it that makes that rude or makes it. Do you know what I mean? I'm explaining that very well, but it's all about perception of whether something is rude or not when the actual words themselves are completely harmless, really. Completely harmless. I wonder what you look like under your shirt. Well, if you're some sort of pervy old man looking at a teenage girl, is it? Well, even then, in some cultures it's not because nudity is not. We've turned it because I get embarrassed just thinking about it. I'm terribly repressed. And the older I get, the more I realize I am. When I was 18, I thought I was cool as fuck and nothing could shock me. But I realized that actually underneath it all, there was a lot of bravado at 18, but I have regressed back to some sort of sour middle-aged woman who doesn't like to even think of the unmentionables, but we're just like, and that's a denial. It's a denial of, I've got this group that skinny dips, and I have been a couple of times. I'm not that enamored with it. I mean, it's a lot easier to get dressed afterwards, especially in the cold, because obviously you're not trying to take wet stuff off. But I don't get in the water and go, oh, it feels lovely against my skin. It's like it's not a really big deal to me. I might feel differently, of course, if I was nubile and I was running naked along the beach or something. But but there's a lot of people that have this thing about nudity going, well, why are we so repressed? Why is it offensive? And it is. Why? Who gives a fuck? In cultures where you just get undressed in front of each other, or nudity is not a big deal, and you can go to the beach and everybody's topless. And I think certainly for British people, it's the association with sex. That's why nudity is wrong.
Yeah. And well, and here too. And actually, I just Googled it. The Puritans were from England and they were trying to purify the Church of England from all Catholic influences.
Oh, right.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
so in purifying themselves of the Catholics, there is a word for it. Not puritanical, where you take no joy in it, the nihilists, isn't that it?
Oh, could be. Yeah. 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 Could be.
Not
Yeah.
like
That makes
joy
sense.
in anything.
Yeah. No, no dancing, no music, no. Yeah. Yeah, that's a whole other conversation. Oh, denial of music and dance and joy. That's what the guys are like. No, stay with the denial of dance and music and
Totally.
joy.
It's denial of any form of joy, because God forbid that might lead you astray. Isn't that weird?
Right.
And actually, what you and I, or certainly what I believe, certainly is the whole purpose of life is actually joy. So it's
Yes.
almost, taking it to the nth degree of how not to live.
Yeah. And I have to pull out my Power versus Force book, but for those of you that are familiar with Power versus Force by, I think it's David Hawkins, um,
Doctor,
what?
doctor.
Doctor, yes. And there's more, he has more books that I keep meaning to get to. And there's just so many books, a little time. He does the map, he maps consciousness as to what feelings or vibrations are low or up to high, and joy is way up there. And so what I do find interesting is that, and I just listened to the Surgeon General that's here in the United States, Dr. Vivek Murthy. He does a podcast, which we've referenced before. And he just had on this woman named Lisa Miller. She's a PhD, and she talks about the scientific proof of spirituality, but that the way to get to spirituality is through, and I'm paraphrasing, is through joy. So when we deny ourselves the dancing, the music, the things that actually get us closer to God, the divine, the source, or whatever, we're actually continuing that separation that we keep building, which is, to me, when we were talking earlier about what I find interesting about what Alzheimer's is teaching us as a collective. And I look at it through, because I find the whole thing interesting for me personally, as I step back from my mom and I see the differences in the woman who raised me and now this person that doesn't remember. And yet at the same time, I think many times I'm actually seeing a pure form of my mom than I saw when I was younger, because there was a lot of, well, no, don't hug me now. Oh no, don't do that now. I've got to get this done. Like, no, you're in my way. Like, there was a lot of that. And now it's just like, now she's a bit soppy. She's more like, remember that I love you. Like, that wasn't, so there's like this removal of this filter or denial. And I just think, like, collectively, there's a couple things that I mentioned to you earlier, Kate. One is that, first of all, food and what we put in our body, so important, because they are calling Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes. So we have to really watch. It's fascinating when you go down that rabbit hole, and how to change your diet.
My mum's always had an excellent diet. I will say that for her, always. We've never eaten fast food, never eaten processed food.
Yeah, there's a whole lot that goes into it. It's just that I just find that fascinating. And then of course, you've got your whole what do you want to call it, genome. And so you've got genetics and you've got epigenetics. I forget the word, but you have genetics, which is your genes. And then you've got epigenetics, which are the switches on your genes that you can turn on or off with food and how you live your life. That's really interesting. But the other thing that I find interesting is this denial of who we actually are, that I find Alzheimer's begins to show us to let that denial go. Because there
So it's actually
there becomes no
eroding the
separation.
ego, essentially.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. Yeah.
Not in all cases, I will say, because for some, the ego becomes something else, because not all
Yes.
cases of dementia, because there's a guy at my mum's who used to be a very gentle chap, and apparently he's not now, whereas my mum, like your mum, has stopped. I wouldn't say they're pretenses, but it's like all those, you say the denial of, and I think of them as like the filters of how you should behave, how you should be seen, how we're supposed to be doing things. And as they advance and they lose those rules in inverted commas, and they just become much more honest about who they are. It's not always pretty, but it's much more honest. It's very interesting, isn't it? For me,
Yeah.
the big thing I know, and I noticed this last week. So last week we had another, your mom's dying or whatever. Went to see her and she'd started being sick. I think we spoke then, didn't we? It was after that. I was sitting there and looking at the people there. They're all at different stages. They have different personalities, and it's all about the quality of life. And there's Like in our wisdom, we decide what life is worth living. And that's a denial in a form. This is the way you should live. Because I mean, Gary's joking. I think he thinks it will make me feel better. It's slightly bad taste, but I'd sort of said this about, because he jokes, because his mom went through this up, down, up, down, up, down, and she's going to die. She's not dead. She's eating yogurt. She's dying. She's, he's been through all of that. So he's just like, you just need to hang in there. There could be months of this. But he sort of, when I told him about mum, who literally was very unresponsive yesterday and just lying in a bed looking like a skeleton, and mouth open, looking like ET, and I honestly thought, right, that's it. And he was like, well, we should be able to like bump them off at that stage. And then you think, yeah, but who did? And then all the moral stuff that goes on that. But that's because our society's decided this is a worthy human being, and anything that falls outside these parameters, they're not entitled to be alive. They bring no worth to us. And this then goes into the whole argument about what is your worth if you're not earning money and you're sucking money off the state, or you require medical, and then you get sick and poor people. Well, what do you do with them? All of that. And that to me is a denial of the range of capabilities that people have right from the start, never mind with disease and that. We are all different. We all bring different things. This idea that there is only one way to live. But also like this idea that if, that it would be a mercy killing. And you're like, well, who decides? Who decides who's being joyful? Looking at mom today, she's having a blast. She's even like doing this with her hair, and being playful, which she's not like that. I think, well, I'd have killed her yesterday had there been a bunch of rules that said, oh, well, she doesn't look well. She's, sucking the NHS. Well, she's not sucking the NHS dry. She's sucked my trust funds dry. No, I don't have trust funds, but, she's, who decides when your quality of life is not good enough? Like, we all have different ideas, because a lot of people say, yeah, but if I get like that, I will want to die. And I say to them, you don't fucking know that. You do not know. You cannot stand over here and judge what's over there and decide that you know what's going on, because you don't. Because my mom thinks things are funny in a way she wouldn't have allowed herself.
Right.
And that's divinity.
Exactly. And at least I can only talk to the United States in that, there is there's a thought that when people get to a certain point in their life, they need to go to a nursing home. And yet all the data and research shows that the moment you take someone out of their home and you move them somewhere else, it can actually shorten their life. Because in their home, that's where they feel safe and that's where they feel like cared for. The thing with American culture is that we got to keep going, right? We got, like, if you're not you got to keep going. You got to get out there. You got to do your job. You got to keep hustling. You got to keep moving, to the point of our own exhaustion. So how in the heck are we supposed to be able to take care of our parents, our elders, right? And I prefer to use the word elders because I look to other cultures that actually honor elders, not, and I know that there's lots of people out there that are doing this, and I know that it's really hard, and I know that's what's coming for me. So it's not like I'm like, but I just wonder if this isn't also an education for the collective to take a look at how we treat our elders and where is the respect and the time and the learning from. Because I also hear, like, I see people younger interact with my mom, and instead of being with her and hearing what she has to say, as, take your shirt off kind of thing, as it may or may not be, there's still something in that to learn from. And I feel like for us as a culture right now, we're denying getting that wisdom from her in whatever state she wants it to be in. And that I find really sad. And I wanted to also say too about the gentleman that you mentioned, as you were talking about, he was really, really nice. And then as the illness took over, or the change in his mind workings, we'll call it that way. That's how the guides are telling me to say it. Changed, he became angry. My mom's mom was actually that way. My mom's mom passed away from dementia, and she was incredibly angry. And so I was like, yeah, what about grandma? She was angry. I asked the guides while you were chatting, and they're like, yeah, because she had to suppress that anger her whole entire life. And so when the filters came down, it was like, rawr, she was just I mean, she was throwing feces at people. Like, she was pissed. She'd spit at my mom. She was pissed. And now I understand why. When I realized, oh, she repressed all that, she had to get it out before she
And
passed.
also, there's a fundamental human need to be heard and respected. And when something starts to nibble away at your coherence, I can't understand what my mum's saying anymore, partly because her mouth's dry and she's worse than a cat. She won't let me put lip salve on it. She won't let us wet her lips because she's just lying there with her mouth open. Maybe you know, she's just really talking like that and can't, and I can't really understand her. But as people don't understand you and stop responding to you or whatever, then that's where anger comes from as well. It's like, that just builds on the anger. This is a really good book if anyone's dealing with dementia called Contented Dementia. I'll put it in the links. But it is about that. It's like there is going to be a frustration because if people are no longer listening to you, you don't understand why you can no longer be understood. So as far as you're concerned, everyone in the world's now an asshole because they're not listening to you, they're not appreciating you, and everybody's treating you differently, and that would add to any anger you've got, repressed or otherwise. Is like, well, I'm still a human being and I still have needs, and just because you don't understand them, and then well-meaning people, or people, just because what else do you do if you don't know what somebody wants? You try and make them do calm them down or whatever, and they'll be like, well, I'm not calm. And yeah, it's
Mhm.
really tricky. It's a very good
Mhm.
book, that, actually.
Yeah.
And the thing I love about that book is it basically says, doesn't matter what the truth is, just let them live in a little fantasy, keep the fantasy light,
Mhm.
just lie if you have to. And I have no qualms about that, and it's basically about just allowing people to live in what little joy they have. Like, don't just tell them stories that
Yeah.
keep them satisfied and happy. It doesn't matter whether it's true or not.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't bother explaining much to my mom when she doesn't understand. We had family portraits taken a couple weeks ago. It was something that I thought, oh, they were really for me. But I also said, they were for everybody there. But the place where we were in my sister's house, and there was this little aspect or wing of my sister's house that was cold because of how it's an older home and the way the heat flows and doesn't flow. So we're in that room and my mom was cold. As people age, your skin is thinner, things aren't flowing as well as they used to, and you feel cold much sooner. And so my mom kept saying that my sister wasn't paying her heating bills, and she kept saying that over and over and over again, which of course I think was just my brother-in-law. I don't think my brother-in-law didn't think had a whole lot of patience. I don't know. Sorry, Benj, I don't know. Anyway, but um, instead of trying to explain to her what was going on, you just have to meet her where she is and say, "Oh, here, mom, here's a blanket. Okay, mom, we're not going to shoot right now, so just put this around you and feel good about it, okay? And then when we shoot, I'll just move it down and we'll take the pictures and then put it back on, okay?" So I just had to keep reminding her of that because there's no sense in explaining what the dealio is. She's gonna, same thing happened in the restaurant. She was said it actually Monday night. She said it too. Oh, they must not have paid their heating bills here. It's cold. And I said, well, let's just get your coat back on you. So, and I said, you can have my coat on your lap if you want to. But anyway, it just was yeah.
Teaching
Yeah.
you patience.
Say what? Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Patience, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I actually quite, I enjoy what I've learned being in the home, that, a new respect for a different way of living, of a different criteria of what life's about what is meaningful and what is not, and who am I to judge, and also sometimes the simplicity of, as you say, meeting someone where they are. There's no,
Mm-hmm.
I can't go to mum with a whole fucking pile of excuses or justifications of why I am this way or not this way. I can't go and talk to her about the price of oil and whatever. We'll just sit and, I don't know, talk about nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
There's no agenda, there's no politics, there's no nothing. And then and she'll get some random thoughts, and I'll, even if I don't understand her, I'll just sort of go, oh, that's nice.
Mm-hmm.
They keep it positive, and and you can see sometimes there's a flicker of that might not have been the right thing to say, but she'll go along with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's just a whole new way of living.
Yeah. I just, and I'm thinking even too, well, Lucas is popping in here too, because as animal communicators, one of the things that the animals have shown me and continue to show me is that, right now, and again, I can only talk from my culture, white culture in United States, is that we're really disconnected from the divine, from everything around us, and from ourselves. And so, Lucas is showing me how my mom supposedly does not like dogs, supposedly. And we lived with them for 3 months when we were between houses. And my mom would constantly complain about the dog hair. And at the same time, then Lucas would always come towards her. And then she'd start talking to him about, oh, you're such a good boy. I love you. Don't I love you? And then his tail would do the circle, which in dog language is like pure contentment. And even when she's here and she goes to sit on the couch, he always sits right next to her and puts his head on her lap. And she always pets him and she talks to him and everything like that. And then she'll complain about the dog hair, which is fine. I get it. But it's just, to me, there's just that when my mom is just getting more and more connected with who she is. She's just saying what she needs to say. Clearly, Lucas reacts to it and is just like, oh, I see you. And she's like, oh, I see you. And then there's just more connection to what, is really going on too. I just find it's just, it'd be interesting if we could look at this in that light from a spiritual perspective, Alzheimer's and dementia, in addition to what's causing it, how do we solve it, how do we fix it, how do we prevent it from happening, which is where all the the drug research and whatnot is going. Where we just started watching the show last night on Netflix. It's done by the producers of Game Changers, and it's about they take twins. Now we can put the link in the show notes, but they take 4 sets of twins and they put one of the twins on a vegan diet and one on an omnivore diet. And they have them do exercises and whatnot. It's an 8-week study because these twins are genetically identical. So what happens when we give one diet and one another diet and then monitor them closely? So we just started watching it last night. It's going to be fascinating. But the scientists setting up the experiment are like, it's so important about what we put in our mouth, which is also to some degree from a spiritual perspective. It's also like there's a connectivity to that too. How like if you think about how other cultures really honor the food that they find or that they harvest, and there's a little ceremony around that, we don't necessarily do that anymore. We're like, oh, what can I get? Okay, pull it in the cart. Okay, off we go. Let's go home, throw it in the microwave, take the foil off, in the plastic bin, all that type of stuff. There's just so much disconnect. I don't know. I'm sorry, that's a little bit of a ramble, but it's fascinating to me, all that it's teaching
I
us.
don't know. It's so controversial, I think, about eating. So I'll be interested here because I understand the incentive behind a vegan diet. I don't think it's a particularly good diet, but partly because people think that that's okay to just go away and eat fast food just because it's vegan, that sort of thing. But the guy that I read this about pranic energy, one of the, I don't know if it was Master Kochoksui, whatever his name is, Mr. Man who came up with pranic healing. But I was reading something on, I think it was a comments on YouTube about food, that certain foods should not be eaten because they carry lower vibration energy. And I don't know how I feel about that, because surely you can just remove that energy. Because certainly, Jews and someone else doesn't eat pork, Muslims don't eat pork.
Mm-hmm.
But at that time where they lived, pork was a dangerous meat to eat. And it was the same with shellfish and the because of food poisoning and stuff like that. So I've always thought of it as a sort of cultural thing, because that was the times that they lived in, as opposed to thou shalt not eat this and shalt, because in a way I think, well, why should eating a pig be any different to eating any other animal? Okay, there are choices about whether you eat animals or not, but anyway, that's all very interesting, isn't it? But you'll have to keep me updated because we've given up on Netflix.
Oh, yeah, I will keep you updated. Because what the scientists are also saying is that every human being is different. So this one size fit all, like, okay, everybody in the human race now switch to plant-based diets. It's like, well, one, is that how your body's made? 2, is that what you're able to get a hold of, which also then raises a whole other question about socioeconomics, because in many places, in this country in particular, there's a whole socioeconomic class that has no access to fresh vegetables or fruits. So then our whole economy actually is based on poor food. if you think about it, which is no, I mean, that's a whole other rabbit hole and we're not going to go down there because, but it
Oh,
just, yeah, I know. Sorry. We're going to stay with denial and how Alzheimer's and dementia are showing us different ways that we actually hold on to denial.
all the time in everything we
Mm.
do. I think there's a whole, just the really basic denial of not being who you are because of all these societal rules and pressures about how we're supposed to behave or how we think we're supposed to behave, and all of that. I mean, that's a denial right there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So I feel like that's a great place to end the conversation this week, Kate.
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for watching, listening to another episode of Making Like Two Humans Being. My name's Julie Hirt. With me, as always, is Kate Foggo. And today we were talking about denial as well, which is the theme for the entire month of February. And we were just talking about it through a little bit of a different way as far as how we use denial, but what Alzheimer's and dementia, particularly in our own mothers, is highlighting for us. So we hope you find this conversation helpful. Please let us know what you think. Let us know how it resonates for you. We'd love to hear from you. And if there were any errors in what we said, feel free to call us out on that too, so we can have a conversation about it so that we can all learn from each other and be connected. That's what we're trying to go for. So you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram. You can follow us right here on YouTube. You can subscribe to our channel. You can also share it, which we would love it if you did, so that others can find us. Anytime you like an episode, that helps others find us as well. And you can follow us on Apple Podcast, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and whatever your favorite podcast platform is. We do these shows every single week. And with that, we'll see you next time here on Making Like Two Humans Being. Take really good care.